Today, Brad's going to step into the reloading room and he's going to take 223 Lake City brass and turn it into 300 Blackout. He's going to show you step by step by step how to do it. The video starts when he takes the brass out of the wet tumbler, and from that point on, he takes you right through the process of how to convert 223 brass to 300 Blackout. It's a very interesting video. Now would be a good time for you to subscribe to Bannock Outdoor Television. Like us, share us, and subscribe. And enjoy the video.
That's the last of them. Then we just pour them out here. And that looks pretty good. But what I do one more step, and is I take my towel, fold it up. I like to shake them around. I'll get as much water off them from the inside as I can. The water seems to make them oxidize a little. There you go. Spread them out flat so they can dry overnight. Then tomorrow, I'll probably put them in the other tumbler. Just put a light tumble on them so they got a little bit of polish on them, and they'll never oxidize. They'll look that way until I shoot them again. And there we go. This is the dry tumbler. I'll put these in, let them run overnight. Tomorrow we'll bring them out and they will be ready to be chamfered, deburred, primed, and loaded. There we go. That's what we're doing today, is we're going to just cut some 300 Blackout brass. Like I said, what we want to do is we want to trim them, set up the jig so that when we trim them and when we full length resize them, they're either right on or only like 1/1000th over the length that it needs to be trimmed. And then we'll run them through trimmer, basically just squaring the nose up and getting it ready to be tumbled again. And we'll go through that whole process and show you how all that works. But this is just a Harbor Freight Drill Master little saw. I've been using this one for quite some time. I did take the guard off here because it heats up so bad. It just has plastic bushings in it. It doesn't have bearings. It has bushings, and the same on this side. It just has bushings, and so it consequently can heat up pretty quick. And so I can cut probably about, I don't know, 20 pieces, then I have to let it cool down, cut 20 pieces, let it cool down. I know if I had a lot bigger, a better one, but I've done several thousand pieces of brass on this, and these are only like 39 bucks. and you can get the warranty on them. You burn it up, you take it back in, and Harbor Freight will give you another new one. And so that's a pretty dang good way to do it. And the jig, like I said, comes from Amazon. There's a couple different types. I really like this one. It's got a shield here to keep you from sticking your finger in there and getting it cut off. It's got a shield here just to kind of keep brass from flipping around. And you can just start feeding them through. I'm going to grab a pair of gloves and we'll start doing that. Okay, we're back and we're going to do this. Big thing is when you put it in here, it kind of vibrates. I rotate it starts to kind of vibrating and it moves it around a little bit. I rotate my finger against that guard and pull back so that I'm clear back against the stop. That way it'll trim it at the length I need. I think I'll set that camera up so you can get a little better view of it. And at this point, I just separate the pieces I cut, throw them in the basket here. And the pieces we cut off, we're just going to throw in the trash. All this is just garbage. All these little ends. Start with resizing it to the 300 Blackout, and then we'll swage the primer pockets and tumble it, and we'll go from there. Oh, I use a lot of baskets in my reloading processes. That's because I can buy these baskets at the dollar store for $1 a piece. They're wire baskets with they've been dipped in some kind of a vinyl plastic, and they hold up really good. This basket here, I probably had it for, I don't know, 10 years. They do wear out. You get holes in them, what have you, but they're only $1 a piece. So I've got 8 or 10 of them here, so I can separate brass and clean them, and they work great. It's to sieve stuff out. I use them with my wet tumbler to get the steel pins out. They work. I use them for all kinds of stuff. But anyway, that's why I'm using these steel baskets, and they work great. I'm going to finish cutting these up, and then we'll go to forming them to the 300 Blackout, running them through the die. Okay, what we want to do now, we got all this brass trimmed. It's just trimmed is all it is. Now we need to run it through the die. I'm using here is one shot, one-a-day lube, case lube. I don't like to use my old pad if I don't have to. You still have to with certain rifles and cartridges or whatever, but with these, I can just spray them down. This is a really good lube, especially if you're doing bulk. When you're doing bulk brass. You know, you're doing 500,000 at a time. Only time it's a tricky once in a while is getting inside the neck for the expander ball to work. But I don't think these won't have a problem many times, and it seems to work really good. Here we are going to use another basket just to grab the cartridges that are sized, and off we go. See that? Knocks the primer out, forms that 300 blackout in that cut-off case. I did not put my spent primer trap on there, so we're going to do that real quick, just so I don't have a big mess to clean up afterwards. But see, it does a really good job. Makes a dang good case. They look good. They're a hair over length, and that's good so that we can trim them. When we trim them, we'll make a nice square flat top on them. And they're only 1,000th or so oversized, so it doesn't take a lot to trim them. Now we're just back to another monotonous job of just running them through, and that's all we got to do is just run them all through the press to shape them to the 300 blackout, going from the 223. And first, all we did was just cut them in the Harbor Freight saw, using a little jig. Make sure that when they are sized, they're a couple thousandth over. When we get done with this, then we'll go to trimming them. It doesn't matter what operation you go in, I guess. We could either trim them or we could chamfer deburr the primer pockets. You need to do that because these are crimp primers, and the Lake City all have crimp primers. And you can use different kinds of tools. I've got 3 different ways I can do it, but my favorite is using the Frankford Arsenal swedging tool. In fact, I think that's where we'll go next. We'll swedge the primer pockets so they're the right size. Where these have been cut and they're a little bit rough, you just got to make sure they fit up in there. You got to remember this is a little bit larger in diameter than what a normal 300 blackout, so it needs to just kind of get started. You can tell you don't want to crush any of them. If you just put them in there and bounce them right up, you might just crush the whole side and ruin it. But one thing with making your own, you're doing it an economically way. So if you ruin a few, it's not that big a deal, not like... Okay, what we're going to do here with these 300 blackout after we've trimmed them and formed the case, running them through the die, all we're going to do is chamfer them, and that's taking the crimp out around the primer in the primer pocket. This tool here does a really good job. You can do it really fast. Once you have it set up, it's nice and clean. It just squishes that out so that you got a decent primer now pocket now. When we're done doing this, we'll trim them to the correct length. Okay, what we're doing here is we're trimming these, and I've set these up so that, you know, when we did the cutting, we cut them so that when they went through the full-length sizer die, they would be really close, and we wouldn't have to trim much off. And that's how these are. It just basically all it does is square the neck up. See that, how that just squares that neck up? I have to use the pliers because the rim is barely sticking out, and I get a sore thumb from trying to pull that in and out with my thumbnail. It makes it pretty tough. And so after a little while, my thumb gets dang sore. So what I've done is I just take a pair of regular pliers and I wrap electrical tape around them so that I don't mar the rim up on the cartridge when I'm pulling those out. And I've got it, you can see that there's not much sticking out. Trim that, and you're able to pull it out, and you can see how that just squared that neck up. That's what it's done, just squared it up. Basically, that's all it is, and that's all the trimming I want to have to do. I want to lose the majority of my brass in making these when I'm cutting them on that Harbor Freight saw. And all I want to have to do with the trimming is square them up, and that gives me the exact distance that I need, which should be 1.38, 1.3, what the hell is it? You gotta look at that in my book again. Oh, 1.358, and that's where we're at right now. So what we're loading here is some 300 Blackout that we've already trimmed, and after taking the 223, cutting it with the saw, running it through the 300 Blackout die, and then tumbling it through a wet tumbler, prime, and powder. What we're using is 19.5 grains of H110, 110 grain bullet, Nosler of Armageddon. I really like these bullets. They work great with the 300 Blackout, super accurate. And we use them a lot for the varmint hunting when we go over to Wyoming and shoot prairie dogs. And these work really good for that. I'll show you here in just a second how I do my powder once I finish this last 8 or 10 bullets. Previously, we showed you how to take the bullet and put it in the brass, not the bullet, but the brass, put it in a saw and cut it. You have a jig and everything. We cut that so that when you run it through the sizer die, you really don't have to do much trimming. You just square the end with the trim, and that will give you enough to make sure that you have a good, that it's the right length and everything. So what I'm going to do is, you take these that are already blocked up, we've already got them primed, and the H110 throws really very consistent. It is very consistent. One reason I really like that powder is it comes through my powder measure really fine. As you can see, it's zeroed up. Been 50 pieces of brass since I did it. Zeroed it last time, or checked it. And this is all I do to put the powder in. And so I powder up 50 at a time. I don't have to measure one at a time or anything because of how well this powder throws. And I'm not sure if you can see this, but once I get that far, then I examine to make sure they're all at the exact same height. That the powder, I don't have one deeper or one more shallow. And I make sure that all 50 rounds are even, they're consistent, that the powder charge is the same. And then all I have to do is put them in my press and put a bullet on them, run them in, and we're good to go. This will be the last 50 of 1,000 that we're doing. So we're gonna have enough to shoot 1 to 2 days out prairie dog hunting. You'll shoot between 500 and 1,000 rounds a day. But we switch guns so that we don't overheat the barrel. We also shoot 223 and 22-250. So we're swapping between usually 3 different rifles during the day. When one of them heats up, we don't want to shoot the barrel out. We don't want to ruin it. We'll swap out, shoot another one. It's pretty dang fun anyway, just because it's a challenge. You just get your mind set on how to shoot each one and how you got to hold when you're shooting those ones out there about 500 yards. So it makes great practice for when you're hunting, big game hunting. It gives you confidence. And you know you're going to hit your target even though you're shooting a different rifle. You're shooting a bigger caliber during the hunting season. This is a great way to get practice shooting, time on the trigger. And the 300 Blackout is a very accurate cartridge and easily made from 223 cases. I prefer to use the Lake City brass. I've used Federal, I've used Remington, but the problem I have with those is after you shoot them once, you end up with a light or a expanded primer pocket. Your primers are barely staying in there, and you might blow them out when you're out there shooting prairie dogs. In the Lake City, you can reload and reload and reload, and the primer pockets always are consistent and always seem to be holding well. With the others, the Remingtons and the Federals, if you try to reload those, when you seat the primer in, you don't hardly have any pressure. And if you're on the cheap and you still want to get one more shot out of that dang thing, you can leave that primer in and take fingernail polish and paint that primer, and it'll usually hold it in there so that it doesn't pop out when you're shooting or anything. But after the second time of doing something like that, I definitely would throw it away. I wouldn't try to load it and put it back in my inventory. Lake City, I don't have any problem with that, and so I just stick with the Lake City. It's been very consistent. It's been very easy to get a hold of. Buy it off Gunbroker or any of the brass companies that are selling brass. And it's easy to make using your little saw from Harbor Freight and a jig that you can get off from eBay or even off from Amazon. You set that up so that when you trim it and you run it through your sizer die, all you have to do is square the cartridge in your trimmer. Basically, that's all you're doing. I've seen other people where you can run it through the die and you end up with this big long son of a gun, and you trim, and I'm not up to that at all. I just soon cut the original piece and be done with it. So there you go. That's how we do it. And hope you enjoyed that.